Musiclist.io. Music licensing reimagined.
Good evening, everybody. Happy Thursday night. Thank you so much for waiting. Thank you for being here. This is our PM Actual News. And no, I'm not going to repeat myself from anything and everything I reported on this morning. So if you have missed our AM Actual News, please go ahead after this and check it out. I think it was about 30 minutes. I covered there again, everything that did happen overnight and also the news in the morning. And in addition to that comes this, which brings me to the point that I have very short news segment today. It's not such a heavy news day, and I also try to filter through the BS and clickbaity stuff, so which makes my coverage shorter and I think better, right? So you can go catch a movie and spend some quality time with your loved ones or by yourself. You decide where. Hello, hey Brandon. Hello, Lisa. Good evening. Feels like I've been missing a few lately, but I'm reading the newsletter. Awesome, that's very good. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. So, newsletter has all the news that I report in the morning and in the evening. So, if you're looking for one spot to get all your news, get your newsletter. And this newsletter today was really long. I think yesterday was also quite interesting. Where do I have it? So honest.substack.com. You see it right here. Subscribe. You can get it free if you decide to support. I'm very grateful for you, but get your newsletter. Okay. So let's talk about something I really love talking about. First Lady Jill Biden. I reported she was in Italy yesterday. She was visiting her great-grandparents' hometown of Giso. And then she met with military families. And then overnight, she traveled to Abu Dhabi. And it was a very busy day in Abu Dhabi today, which was had like 7 different meetings on camera, off camera, very important meetings. So let's talk about it. First Lady Jill Biden visited Abu Dhabi, focusing on cancer advocacy and cultural heritage. Her engagements included a private meeting with Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak and visits to Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi and a tour of the historic Qasr Al Hassan. At Cleveland Clinic Abu Dhabi, Dr. Biden met with medical leaders. Here's a picture. To discuss advancements in oncology and patient care. She shared her personal connection to cancer advocacy, recalling her son's Bo's glioblastoma diagnosis, and praised efforts to destigmatize cancer screenings for women. The First Lady also learned about the use of AI in treatment and challenges related to healthcare costs, reaffirming her commitment to Biden Cancer Moonshot Initiative. Here we go. Later at Qasr Al Hassan, she explored the UAE's cultural heritage, participated in an Arabic coffee ceremony, and left a message here. And left a message of peace and prosperity in the guest book. And you see here, may the wisdom of these walls continue to light a way forward in peace and prosperity for centuries to come. Thank you for your warm welcome and hospitality, Dr. Jill Biden. So you see here, very cute. And then, of course, she attended also Middle East and Africa Summit. So later at Qasr Al Hassan, she explored the UAE's cultural heritage, participated in the Arabic coffee ceremony, which was off camera, and left a message in the book. Now, the visit underscored US-UAE collaboration in health and cultural exchange, highlighting shared priorities in cancer research and cultural preservation. A deep dive, really stop by stop, is in your newsletter, which is really interesting. I mean, she spoke to the only female OBGYN in Saudi Arabia. And why is it important? Because the Cleveland Clinic in the US, obviously, is headlining the cancer moonshot that the Bidens have started, right? I explained how this works. You can deep dive in the newsletter as well. And so the partner hospital or partner clinic is in Abu Dhabi. And what President Biden did essentially was, when he wanted to combat the stigma of cancer being dangerous, but also we don't really share information with other countries, he started talking to different doctors that are sort of trailblazers when it comes to cancer research, just to find out that everybody was sort of like dreaming to get Nobel Peace Prize and was not sharing any information with other clinics and doctors. So then he traveled as VP, as Obama's VP at that time. He traveled all around the world, talked to these doctors, and created this Moonshot Initiative, where they talked about what the steps we need to undertake to bring the research forward, because united, we're stronger than everybody one by one. And so then money was allocated to it. The researchers and the clinics started earning with that as well, which prompted them to continue with the initiative. And then now, as president, this was just they doubled down on investment and also on results ultimately. So that's why this was important. Now, overnight, she's traveling to Qatar. There she has some meetings and also will attend the sort of a royal type of wedding there. And then she will be in Paris, France, and attending the reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral with Trump. Well, Trump will be there as well, but also 50 heads of states will be there too. Now, today or tonight, President Biden lit the national Christmas tree at the Ellipse. This was very fast, just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, lights! That's it. So I didn't even, bother to get video. But there was not much of a speech, but it was just sort of starting or beginning the holiday season officially. And yes, he said Merry Christmas. So for those who bother that we don't say Merry Christmas, he actually did say it. In other news, the Department of Transportation's Bureau of Transportation Statistics, the BTS, today released U.S. Airlines October 2024 fuel cost and consumption numbers, indicating U.S. scheduled service airlines 1.5 billion gallons of fuel, which is 2.9% more fuel than in September of 2024, meaning we travel more. Okay. Now, and 2.3% more than in pre-pandemic October 2019. So now we're traveling even more than before the pandemic, which of course boosts the earnings of the airlines. And given that the gas prices are lower, boosts their profits too. So the cost per gallon of fuel in October 2024 accounted on average $2.29, was down 4 cents from September 2024 and up 32 cents from October 2019. Total October 2024 fuel expenditure was up 1.2% from September 2024 and up 18.8% from pre-pandemic October 2019. So year-over-year changes in fuel consumption and cost for October 2024 includes a 2.1% decrease and domestic fuel consumption and 28.6% decrease in domestic fuel cost and a 27.1% decrease in cost per gallon. So domestic fuel consumption increased from September to October this year, while increasing only 1.7% from October 2019. So increased fuel consumption reflects an increase in airline passenger travel over the same period. So bottom line, what we need to know, gas prices down, travel up, economy up, okay? Who's going to take credit from it? Probably Donald Trump. Okay, just to be stated. Also this morning, I attended the meeting with the, let me read real clear. So with the General Bussière, and this was a very productive and interesting meeting to talk about the bomber fleet that we do have, and also the Triad, which, let me have a readout. So the U.S. bomber inventory, which is really important to discuss today, given the threats, right? In the Middle East, we do help, right? What do we send there? bombers, right? To help Middle East, to help defend Israel and confront Hezbollah, Hamas, and whatnot, and Iran ultimately. With the threats in Europe, we're allocating bombers to NATO nations, right? Allowing us to be there for our allies and for us as well. So we do send bombers everywhere. Now, that's why it is important to see where are we, right? What can we account for and how do we compare to China and to Russia? So the part as how we are doing, that's what was covered at this conversation with the general. And then how do we compare? This is my research. This is what I added to it. Okay, so the US bomber inventory consists of 140 aircraft, including the B-1, B-2, and B-52 bombers. These platforms play a critical role in Middle Eastern and European operations, providing assurance to allies and demonstrating readiness to counter any threat. However, the age of these aircraft poses significant challenges. So the youngest one, B-2 bomber, is 30 years old and conducts about 11% of all operations, right? This is the youngest bomber aircraft that we do have. The oldest one, B-52, is 70 years old. So given our aging fleet, what we need to do is really optimize how do we use munition? How do we use them? So we don't use them for any missions that are not really necessary, right? Because it's an aging fleet, and we have about 2,030 pilots or those who can manage it, right? So this is our entire Air Force fleet for the bomber fleet. Now, why so low? This is indeed the lowest numbers in US history, because in 2017, and I'll let you understand who was the president back then, the funding for Air Force was disrupted. So for that reason, we have this type of delays and this type of situation right now. Okay? So as General Bussiere noted, the demand on these aging platforms remains high, with efforts ongoing to optimize munitions usage and upgrade capabilities to meet modern operational demands. Now, modernizing. What are we doing to modernize the nuclear triad? The nuclear triad, which comprises air, land, and sea-based systems, remains a cornerstone of U.S. defense strategy. So the general emphasized that the Air Force is responsible for 2/3 of this triad, and the Navy oversees the remaining leg, so 1/3. The apparatus, spanning 450 launch points, has served 11 presidential administrations and remains apolitical to execution. And so what the general stated is that there were 11 presidents or presidencies, right? Some stayed for double term, who wanted the triad to stay and to stay also upbeat and invest in it. So he said, look, if we hear that we need to practically dismantle ourselves, we will just follow the orders, because that's what we're doing. He said, he was asked, what do you think? And he's like, I'm not here to think or provide you with advice. I'm here to execute orders to my best ability. And that's what I'm going to be doing. Hence, I'm not going to be giving any speculation or any advice to anybody. There are committees that do give that advice. And so let's leave them to that. And those committees are within Air Force. So the nuclear triad, okay, so renewal and modernization are imperative, with Congress mandating a bipartisan commission to evaluate the appropriate size and posture of the nuclear force. This is especially critical given the dual challenges posed by optimized Russian threat and rapidly growing Chinese military. So the B-21 Raider, that's the new bomber, so described by General Bussiere as the most exquisite weapon built by human hands, represents the future of America's bomber force. Currently in production, the Air Force plans to acquire 100 items. Now, the latest study showed that we do need about 220 items, but then he urged to reevaluate this figure given now the new threats from Russia and from Indo-Pacific and China especially. And that's, by the way, the general here. So transitioning from Cold War and dynamic. So during Cold War, the U.S. faced a singular adversary in Soviet Union. Today, the landscape is vastly different, with Russia posing a sophisticated threat and China rapidly expanding its capabilities. So the general highlighted the importance of adapting the U.S. nuclear force to address these dual challenges while continuing to provide deterrence and reassurance to global partners. And then the role of NC3. NC3 is the Nuclear Command, Control, and Communication. It's called NC3. The system is vital component of the triad, ensuring seamless control of weapons from president down to operational forces. So this is something where we say, okay, president pushes a button and things explode. No, that's the NC3 that takes care of it. So if a president says something, every single stage from up down, right, has to agree, and then somebody launches something, right? Just in simple terms for us to understand that no, Trump can sit just at the table being bored with McDonald's, push a button, explode. That doesn't happen. It also doesn't happen in Russia that way either. Yes, Putin, for instance, signed an executive order where he controls the nuclear force and can launch something. But again, this bypasses the Congress, so to speak, in his terms. But again, there's another NC3 in their way that has to agree with that decision. Okay, just for us to understand. However, the transition from analog to digital systems, that's what the general said, which is a great thing. But then this just presented such a huge cyber threat. And that is their biggest concern these days, the cyber threats, because it's easier to infiltrate than any analog operated communication. So General also in his insights underscore the critical role of modernization and adaptability in maintaining America's strategic deterrent as the U.S. continues to navigate an increasingly complex global security environment. Investments in advanced technologies such as B-21 radar and renewed focus on optimizing existing systems. So now we do have 140 bombers. So how do we compare, right? China's bomber force comprises 120 H-6 aircraft, which are roughly the same vintage as U.S. Air Force's B-52. So they're about 70 years old as well, and are based on the Russian Tu-16, right? So again, why am I talking about this? I'm not talking about this to increase your anxiety, but actually to lower your anxiety. And to combat those conspiracy stupid theories that we're about to begin World War III, that we're going to explode. The three main countries, US, China, and Russia, none of them are ready for World War III. Period, point blank, end of story. Everybody's fleet is 70 years old, with US, the youngest ones, being 30 years old. And B-21 is in production sometime when we allocate money for it. Okay? So China, dangling everything in front of our eyes, they have 120 bombers, was 70 years old. Now, Russia's bomber fleet includes Tu-160, which is 11 aircrafts, Tu-95, 55 aircraft, Tu-22 organized in 4 divisions, forming part of its long-range aviation command, which consists of 6 divisions, including 2 heavy bomber units. These bombers are capable of carrying gravity bombs and modified Kh-55 cruise missiles. Now, additionally, they operate Su-34, the newest tactical bomber, with 159 units. Now, this was 159 units reported by the end of 2023. What is Russia doing right now? Invading Ukraine with what? With these bombers. So the actual numbers and the losses are significantly higher. So are they there with the 151? Probably not, because they have been bombed by Ukraine, and Ukraine will do their best not to inform how much or how little Russia still has, because that's not profitable, right? So for this, at this point, Russia, is bleeding, right? That's why it's begging for weapons in North Korea and in China and in Iran. They're running out of it. China is not prepared. US is also a bit dangling since 2017. So for this reason, when we talk about, oh, we're gonna do Article 5, we're gonna, first of all, Article 5 of NATO. If anything were to happen to any ally, right? We're not, NATO is a defensive alliance. So it's not going to intervene in anybody's internal politics, because I see these conspiracies like NATO will intervene because Trump was taking over our democracy. Even if, right, and I might agree with this. So I do agree with that, right? It's a sort of take over by force here. NATO will not intervene. This is internal procedures, right? Based on our democracy and the votes and whatever. Who could interfere is our current administration. But again, this is a talk for another story, for another time. My point is NATO will only, again, interfere if an ally has been threatened or has been attacked by an adversary, meaning, let's say Russia bombs Poland, God forbid. So it's not an attack within NATO, it's an attack outside NATO, and it has to be a physical military attack. Then the Article 5, if it's activated, unanimously, NATO members have to decide on the action. And it could be retaliating, right? It could be a defensive action. It could be also just supplying munition to that particular country, so that country would be acting on their own behalf and defending themselves, which is literally what happens with Ukraine right now, right? So Article 5 does not mean that the world will explode and we're all at war. They have to unanimously decide to act. Now, my next question is Romania. And this morning I reported on those elections. And the guy who's leading, he said he will stop aid to Ukraine and he will what? Invoke veto. Veto on voting on the aid for Ukraine within NATO. So here we're losing the unanimous decision. So if he were to win, and within NATO we have an adversary, right, who will be acting out, then the Article 5 to be activated will be problematic. So for this reason, I would love for you to dive deep. If this is of an interest to you, so much so that you are willing to comment all around social media, please learn first. Because again, just out of respect to you, learn and then comment, because that's how we get into something reasonable and we get out of a bubble. Because there's a bubble, the MAGA bubble, but there's also a blue bubble. And that's what I'm seeing. Everybody's sort of like expecting Trump to, not to be inaugurated, and just nonsense. Where's this coming from? So now about Ukraine, it was reported that Andrei Yermak, whom I covered, there was a meeting with him and I covered it at the conference on foreign affairs. He's the advisor to Zelensky. There is no official position for him, but he's sort of like it's his right hand, so to speak. So he met yesterday with J.D. Vance and President-elect Donald Trump's nominees for National Security Advisor and the special envoy for Russia and Ukraine, according now to Wall Street Journal, but also according to every single Ukrainian source. There's videos, there's pictures of that. So for those who wonder if J.D. Vance exists, yes, he does. He met with him yesterday. And this Keith Kellogg, right? That's the special envoy to deal, right, with the Russia-Ukrainian issue. So the special envoy Kellogg expressed support for sending arms to Ukraine to strengthen his position in peace talks. However, the peace plans discussed by Trump's team do not include Ukraine's potential membership in NATO. So not even a potential membership. Before we talked about delaying it by 20 years, now it's like off the table. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson rejected White House request to pass $24 billion in additional aid for Ukraine by the end of the year, saying for any further assistance for Kiev would be decided by Trump come January. So now, when it comes to China, remember recently I reported that the leader of Taiwan was visiting U.S. land. So not really mainland, but Guam and Hawaii. And so, of course, China is pissed. We were expecting them to start doing some drills around Taiwan. They're not doing that. What they're doing instead, they impose sanctions. So Beijing has announced sanctions on 13 U.S. military firms following Washington's approval of potential arms sale to Taiwan valued at $385 million and Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te's visit to U.S. territory. Now, truth be told, U.S. defense companies are prohibited to trade with China. Point blank. They are not allowed to trade with China to begin with. So those sanctions, it's sort of like, it's sort of ceremonial rather than anything that should be even considered and discussed, because you couldn't do it before. Now you shouldn't be doing it. Okay. So Amnesty International accused today Israel of genocide in Gaza. Israel obviously rejected the claim. So Amnesty International's report on conflict between Israel and Gaza claims there is sufficient evidence to believe that Israel's actions in Gaza I am back. Now, this did not happen, Brandon, before you were joining us, because before it really didn't happen. Lisa can certify. Well, it happened literally for you, I guess. There's the black screen. All right. So, again, what was it? So the Amnesty International report stated that Gaza, that Israel is conducting sort of genocide in Gaza. Now, Israel rejected the report, calling it entirely baseless and arguing it did not take into account operational realities in Gaza or Hamas violation of international law. The Israeli branch of Amnesty International also disagreed with the conclusion. So, then the growing threat in space warfare. That's the last thing what I want to talk about. Sorry, it's all day Pentagon today. So, if you want, I can talk about Hegseth and his sexual affairs and drinking problem, because that's all mainstream media talks about, or Tulsi Gabbard being Russian asset. I talked about it this morning briefly, and yeah, he has a drinking problem and she's a Russian asset, but I don't know if you want me to cover that more. But out of anything that matters, here we go. So, what was declassified recently? It was not reported earlier. It was classified. Now it's out. In February 2022, U.S. Space Command detected Russia's launch of Cosmos 2553. This is a satellite that entered a high-altitude orbit, prompting concerns about the new Russian military program aimed at potentially deploying a nuclear weapon in space. So, good news. At this point, it's a satellite with a dummy head. So this head does not have nuclear weapons in it. Bad news, it's already on the orbit and it may have nuclear stuff in it if they decide to do so. Right? So it is already launched. It's in high orbit. It's orbiting Earth. So they do have the infrastructure, so to speak. Now, Boom, boom, boom. These satellites are crucial for everything from, okay, sorry. While the satellite itself is not armed, it carries a dummy warhead, suggesting it is part of a broader effort to develop space based weapons capable of disabling global satellite networks. Now, what are those global satellite networks? Predominantly on our end, this is SpaceX. And tomorrow in the newsletter, I'm going to show you all the graphs with this. US, I mean, in terms of Musk, he is busting about 4,000 to 5,000 satellites a year on orbit. So we are by far those who are sending, we meaning United States, are by far those who are sending most satellites on the orbit. And so that's what, I mean, that is what our threat is in terms of the Russian thing now. Now, the satellites that are orbiting are crucial for everything from military operations to weather forecasting and are vulnerable to disruption by such weapons, obviously, by nuclear weapons. Space has transitioned now from peaceful domain to militarized zone, with the US, Russia, and China developing advanced anti-satellite technologies, including missile systems and robotic satellites. Now, we are already working on it. The problem that I'm seeing with this, that our only contractor is SpaceX. And now, given that NASA will be run by pretty much Musk's one of the investors, this Isaacson that I reported on yesterday. So SpaceX is pretty much running NASA and overseeing everything and getting all the money from it. So the idea of a nuclear detonation in space, while catastrophic, remains a possibility, threatening not only military operations but also civilian infrastructure on Earth, such as communications, banking, and supply chains. Now, we would not hear anything because space does not transmit sound. It's not going to kill the planet. The problem is that it's going to take care of all the satellites in a bad way, and so we lose communication. That's what. Again, this is hypothetically, right? I'm just saying this was declassified. This will be tooted in all newspapers and alarm. So I want to prohibit you from, going nuts about this and just explaining what it actually means. So the development of space weapons combined with outdated international treaties like Outer Space Treaty and Limited Test Ban Treaty has created a dangerous environment of rising tensions and limited regulation in space. So with more nations investing in satellite systems, including SpaceX, Starlink, and plans from China and Amazon, the space economy is booming, but also more vulnerable to military threats. The growing militarization of space calls for urgent international cooperation, better space traffic management, and stronger treaties to prevent catastrophic space warfare. The future of global stability hinges on addressing the mounting dangers in space before it's too late. So it is important to be addressed. Also, the International Space Station is leaking oxygen, so it will be detonated in a good way soon. So now currently we are, it was started by started by Soviet Union, United States added to it. It's as big as a football field, by the way. It's 400 kilometers, or 450 sometimes. It goes up and down on the orbit from planet, right? And so it's orbiting around, orbiting our planet. And because it's leaking oxygen, the countries decided unanimously to pretty much get rid of it. And then the problem is what's next, right? Because China is developing something on their own. There's Japan, there's now Saudi Arabia, there is obviously Russia. So, and we have a bunch of satellites that are monetized for our internet resources and also for military too. So at this point, we need to have some type of agreements, and this will obviously fall on the shoulders of the next administration. So a chain reaction. Exactly, Brandon. Yeah, I mean, that's one guy does something, another one repeats, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that's it. I'm done. I promise you a very short thing today. But again, I would suggest for all of us to stay really away from mainstream media because it's so much about he said, she said, sexual abuser, drunk this, drunk that, Russian asset. We know it, right? You know about Tulsi Gabbard. You know about Hegseth. I think the Hegseth guy's nomination is there to sort of distract us from Tulsi Gabbard. And I don't see him being nominated or approved, but I do see, for instance, somebody like Governor DeSantis becoming the chief of Pentagon or the Secretary of Defense, and that might be even worse option because that's a complete yes man, right? And he probably would be more effective than this Hegseth guy because he is more organized to follow orders, right? So for this reason, again, let's wait. Let's wait who will be confirmed, what they finally going to do. I understand that Musk and Ramaswamy were at Capitol Hill today. They were discussing federal cuts. The biggest cut is $119 billion from the veteran medical care. So again, this is them discussing. These guys were not elected. These guys are not officials. These guys are literally made their businesses and their billions of dollars off of our taxpayer money. So, I mean, they're there for the photo shoot with the baby on the head and on the shoulders. And okay, all right. I mean, all right. So good night, everybody. Thank you for joining me. You know what's interesting, though, if you want to know? This is not internet. It goes dark, and I get requests from YouTube and X, because that's the two sources I'm streaming to do like a questionnaire, because what I'm saying is like violence. So somebody keeps tapping that it's violent, what I'm talking about, or the platforms are thinking I'm being violent. I'm not sure. Me, my earrings being violent today. Anyway, I didn't wake up and choose violence, but it goes dark, and then I have to fill out like questionnaire that I do understand that I'm not violent. Weird. Okay, anyway, thank you guys for joining me. No need to worry just yet, Lisa says. We know we're going to need to worry, but until they are sitting in hearings, we should take your advice, head on a swivel, and enjoy the holidays. Amen. Amen, Lisa. And I can't wait for you to experience the reopening of Notre Dame, the cathedral. Yes, she's right about the distractions. Indeed. Hey, Maurice, good night. Thank you. We'll rewatch Miss the Beginning. Good. Thank you. Good night, Vivian. Good night. Good night, Brandon. Good night, Lisa. Good night, everybody. Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a good night. See you tomorrow morning. And I hope without the questionnaires and the taps of violence. Okay. Have a good night. Thank you for being here.